So what is this Throne of the Tides mini expansion all about? Well, the warrior got the trademark card of the expansion. It's Clash of the Colossals! In one corner, it's Azumat. In the other corner, it's Neptulon. And in this card, it is a terrible card. 3-mana warrior spell, add a random colossal minion to both players' hands. Yours costs 2 less. This card is a -1 card deficit because you're getting a card, but you're also giving your opponent a card. But your card comes at a 2-mana discount. The main problem is that Innervate, big Innervate, which used to give 2 mana, used to cost 0. So 3 mana is kind of it's an expensive Innervate. Furthermore, it's very random because not all Colossals are equal, so basically you're overpaying. This is a slight nerf to School Teacher because it is not a great spell to teach the teacher, the student, even though it is a 3-mana card, which is like, usually the higher mana card it is, the better it is to teach, but this one might be an exception. I'm not entirely sure I would play this card if it cost 1 mana. Next up we got Tidal Revenant. 8 mana 5/8 elemental, battlecry, deal 5 damage, gain 8 armor. It's a very plain filler card. I think if I ever decide that, the card isn't good or something, I'd actually have to think about what mana cost would I feel good playing this at. We have a comparison card, Shield Maiden. That's the 5/5/5 gain 5 armor, which is not being played. Using that as kind of a benchmark, I think I would feel pretty good playing this at 6 mana. So at 8 mana, it's just a bit too much. There's always like a stat to mana ratio, which is good, and 8 is a bit too heavy. The interesting thing is, this is probably the closest card to Ultimate Infestation in quite some time. It's just missing draw 5. And you've got Igneous Lava Gorger, 4 mana 3/5 elemental, with Taunt, Battlecry, Dredge, gain armor equal to its cost. Compared to the neutral Dredger, this one seems pretty solid. Now, of course, the neutral Dredger is nowhere near being played, but this card, it seems like a natural fit is Control Warrior. Did you know that Shield Shatter is actually a 10 mana spell, even though it's cast for 0 mana all the time? So 4 mana 3/5 Taunt, Battlecry, put the AoE clear onto the top of your deck, and gain 10 armor, making the AoE clear cost 0. That's not bad. Now, there's just one problem with Igneous Lava Gorger. Or maybe I should call it 2 problems. Problem number 1. From the Depths is very popular. That reduces the bottom 5 cards by 3, which means if you then play Igneous Lava Gorger, you are going to gain less armor. But on the benefit side, you are getting another card, which is discounted by 3. So, that's actually pretty good. Maybe that's kind of a package, in fact. The main other problem is that there's a lot of 4-drops competing for the 4-drop slot. Like, I could see perhaps running Igneous Lava Gorger over Heavy Plate. Kind of makes sense. You get the 3/5 Taunt, you potentially gain the 8 armor, and I think it's worth experimenting in the Control Warrior deck. Let's jump into Warlock! My free-to-play run is actually going to extend into the mini-expansion. Will we be saved by these cards? Well, let's take a look at the legendary card, Commander Ulthik. 5 mana 7/7. Battlecry, your opponent's cards cost health instead of mana next turn. You'd want to run this card in an aggressive deck, if you wanted to run this card, because you need to actually use your turns 1 through 4 to put your opponent in such a tough health spot that you drop the Ulthik and you basically lock them out of the game because they can't recover since their health is too low. That's the theory of Ulthik, but if you ever play this card and your opponent actually has health, you might lose the game. It could be said 5 mana Battlecry lose the game, and then you win the games that you've already done really well in, but sometimes you throw those games really hard too. So the reason why you wouldn't want to run this in Control Warlock is because your opponent has a lot of health. Generally, cards costing health instead of mana is very good. Fun fact, if your opponent has a Holy Machirol, they can spend infinite mana. Herald of Shadows. 3 mana 4/2 Naga. Battlecry, if you cast a shadow spell while holding this, deal 2 health from a minion. One notable card that this card is extremely strong against is the Shaman Mooncatcher. This steal health goes through the Divine Shield. That's a really efficient answer. It's like a 3 mana 4/4, a deal 2 damage, but it's especially good because it goes through Divine Shield and kills them. There are shadow spells that you would cast early, such as Touch of the Nathrazim and Mortal Coil. Completely reasonable. I could totally see running this card in my free-to-play deck or in a Warlock deck. And a real spicy card. It's Immolate. 4 mana, light every card in the opponent's hand on fire! In 3 turns, any still in hand are destroyed. And notably, it's a fire spell. This card being a fire spell is good with multicaster. You can draw your Fel, your Shadow, and your fire spell. I was thinking to myself, how many cards would you actually need to burn from your opponent for this card to be worth it? And I decided to compare it with Arcane Intellect. Arcane Intellect gives you 2 cards. In theory, then, if you made your opponent discard 2 cards, that would be roughly 3 mana. So therefore, this is a 4 mana and a 3-turn delay, so I reckon you need to get 3+ cards. Now, the main problem with Immolate is that it does nothing. Literally, 4 mana do nothing against a lot of decks. Those decks would be any aggressive decks, mid-range decks. You might think it's good against combo decks, but against combo proactive decks such as Boar Priest, this actually also does almost nothing. Even control decks should be able to play a very large amount of the cards that you set on fire, given that it's 3 entire turns. This card is notably good against Kazaku-san, because you might not be able to get through the 4 dragons before discarding Kazaku-san. But that's only if they actually have the Kazaku-san in their hand, which they very well might not have it. Also, Control Warrior has Finley, famously because of the From the Depths card. And if you cast Immolate and they Finley their Burning Hand, I reckon you'll be pretty sad. Basically, I don't foresee there ever being a meta where you could afford to put Immolate into your Warlock deck, because so often it is going to be a 4 mana do nothing. It's actually very comparable to Glide. People pointed out that Glide would be very strong against control decks because control decks tend to hoard a lot of cards, and then if you Glide them, they go down to 4. And you know why Glide didn't work? It's because aggro decks exist. Alright, Shaman gets some love. Look at this card! Command of Neptulon, 5 mana nature spell which summons 2 5/4 elementals with Rush with Overload 1. It's not hard to say that this card is disgusting. It's 5 mana for 10/8 worth of stats with Rush, and it comes with Overload 1, so, you know, 6 mana for 10/8 stats with Rush. You can play it proactively, you can play it defensively. Only problem is, what's a Shaman? No, that's actually the problem. Shaman is not in a great spot at the moment, but hey, that's a good reason why they got such a strong card. This might be strong enough that any Shaman deck would want to put it in their deck. The only question is, will there be a Shaman deck? Look, this card is cursed. Oh my god. It's got arms, it's got legs. 3 mana 3/2 Murloc. What in the world is happening? Battlecry. Your next 2 Murlocs cost 2 less. So that's actually really, really strong. It is a -1 cost Murloc for 3/2. It's both better and worse than a -1 cost Murloc. Worse because you can only play it on turn 3. Better because you can ramp out Murlocs, such as Mutinous. But yeah, this is a very strong push for Shamans to go Murloc. Now the question is, could that possibly be good? Wait, that's not all! We're gonna give Shaman another really good Murloc. 4 mana 4/4 Murloc, Tidelost Burrower, Battlecry Dredge. If it's a Murloc, summon a 2/2 copy of it. So not just a 2/2 Murloc, but a copy of the Murloc, which could be quite good because sometimes that Murloc will have Rush, sometimes it'll summon a lifesteal weapon. But yeah, that's a 6/6 for 4, and it dredges a Murloc to the top. Here's the question. 1, Will there be a Murloc Shaman deck? Of the many types of Shaman decks you could build, Murloc Shaman was one of them. Wasn't particularly good, but it looks like you can replace the Auction House Gavel and the Flame Tongue Totem with these two cards, and got yourself a Murloc deck. Doesn't look great to me, though. Finally, over in Druid, we have this cute little Spirit of the Tides guy. 2-mana, 2/2 elemental. If you have any unspent mana at the end of your turn, gain +1/+2. So you can play this on turn 2 as a 2/2. You can play this on turn 3, have 1 unspent mana, and then get a 3-mana 3/4. And then the next turn after that, if you have 1 more unspent mana, you can have a 4/6. Woo! That was sarcasm. This card is terrible. There's Moonbeam. 1-mana arcane spell. Deal 1 damage to an enemy twice. This is really, really good if there is a lot of spell damage, because the spell damage applies twice. And it can go face. Wow. The downside is, right now, there's no great way to come up with a decent amount of spell damage. But with Moonbeam in the game, they're going to have to be especially cautious at giving Druid access to spell damage. It's one of those, like, theoretically, if something existed, it would be quite good, but that something doesn't exist, and that something is also unlikely to exist, given that people are probably tired of the Malagos and then, like, whoop-pow, pow-pow-pow type of gameplay. OTKs. Now, this card is kind of useful for, you know, being 1 mana, deal 2. Great against Divine Shield, and then, like, dealing extra damage. But yeah, it's ultimately not strong enough to actually be in any deck, I'd say. What it's really looking for is some spell damage. And you've got Herald of Nature, a 3-mana 3/3 Naga. Battlecry, if you've cast a nature spell while holding this, give your other minions +1/+2. That's actually quite strong. One of the reasons why Token Druid fell off is because Arbor Up got removed from the game, rotated out. You know, Token Druid just lacked a nice board buff. This is very efficient. It's a 3-mana 3/3 that buffs your other minions by +1/+2. Living Roots and Composting are also both nature cards, which are often in Token Druid. The question is this enough to make the Token Druid viable? And I think not quite. But good base for when there are more tools given to the Token Druid. So that's an exciting look into 4 of the classes, and also a cool note that the expansion is basically in one corner Azumot, in the other corner Neptulon. Who will be victorious? Which classes will get the good stuff? Cool.